Yes, welcome in. Badgers fall again. 3 straight losses now for Wisconsin. They sit at 5-5 on the year. Came up just short against number 1 Oregon. All the things were going right for Wisconsin to have an amazing night for a second night in a row, for that matter. An opportunity to have a storming of a playing surface for a second night in a row. And Wisconsin obviously just couldn't get it done. They lose 16-13 to Oregon. And we are left questioning this program and left questioning the coaching staff and left questioning the quarterback and left questioning a ton of stuff once again, Jesse.
We certainly are. I want to give some grace here for the fact that they just went down to the wire with the number 1 team in the country that had been dominant outside of that Ohio State win. That was a 1-point win over the last month. Beat every team by at least 3 touchdowns, was held 20 points below its season scoring average, and looked like it was highly susceptible in an environment that was as good and rowdy as it has been all season. But you are measured not by how close you are, because what do they say, Zach? Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Maybe they need to update that. I don't actually know who walks around carrying hand grenades, but the point is they were close, but that doesn't get you where you want to go as a program.
I think it depends what part of the world you're in, probably, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
All right. Yeah. In Madison, Wisconsin, probably not hand grenades. Other parts of the country or other parts of the world, probably, yeah, hand grenades. But yes, so Wisconsin doesn't get it done. They're 5-5, still looking for that one more win to get to bowl eligibility, and they'll have 2 more chances to get it next week at Nebraska and then at home against Minnesota on Black Friday. And we'll talk about those games later, but we have plenty to get to here with the Oregon game and all how it played out, and we'll get to what went right, what went wrong, and we'll get to your questions as well. Before we do, as always, Home Field Apparel is the official apparel sponsor of the camp. No one has better vintage gear than they do in the college game. Go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. So much new gear, and I'm sure they're going to have some more, even more new stuff as we get closer to Black Friday. Perfect Christmas gift or whatever religion you are gift to give this holiday season. And if you use the promo code Bucky24, you can get 15% off your first purchase. All right, let's jump into first what went right for Wisconsin. I think that there were a number of things that went right, and I think we both would agree it probably has to start on the defensive side of the ball.
Without question. This was their best defensive effort all season. I know they gave up fewer points against worse teams, but when you consider, as I said at the outset, that Oregon was held 20 points below its season scoring average, Dillon Gabriel, a Heisman Trophy candidate, didn't throw a touchdown pass, which is the first time that's happened all season, and that they only allowed Oregon to score 1 total touchdown. They're the reason that Wisconsin was in this game, deep into the game, why it was still a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter. And I think we saw a lot of good things out of that group. First of all, I felt like, and I don't know if you agree with me, Zach, the edge rushers, they had their best game. They were wreaking havoc. They were doing a lot of the things that you and I saw during spring ball, during the preseason. May not necessarily have gotten home and gotten the sacks, but impacted Dillon Gabriel to make him uncomfortable. Defensively, I know cornerback Nazir Forkerin said one of the things he felt they did well was disguise some coverages. He played a little bit differently, and they just made it really difficult. You know, I said, even in the story that I wrote, that it looked like Oregon was sort of sleepwalking a little bit and looked exactly like a team that was playing its 8th consecutive weekend before having its second bye and then wrapping up the regular season against Washington. But Wisconsin also deserves a lot of credit for making it tough. That game could have changed if Dillon Gabriel had thrown a touchdown pass and not thrown it behind his receiver or tight end. And yes, there was a fortuitous bounce and Nazir picked it off. But the defense was opportunistic and just did everything imaginable to hold down one of the best offenses in the country.
You go back to the edge rushers that you mentioned. The play of the game obviously was the 4th and 9, right? But did you see Leon Lowry on that play? He just goes right through the right tackle. He bulldozes the running back. It's what forced Dillon Gabriel out of the pocket. Now, they didn't have any contain on the other side to keep him in the pocket, which is unfortunate, but they blew it up. And it was as vicious and as, I don't know, violent as they have been all year on the edges, for sure. And it wasn't just Leon Lowry, John Pius as well. But both of those guys, I thought maybe had their best games. And it's something that you just don't see. We haven't seen from Wisconsin's edge defenders this year for sure. But
Yeah.
that play on 4th and 9 was obviously the play of the game. But just go back and watch the guy coming off the left edge. I'm almost positive it was Lowry, but it could have been, certainly could have been Pius. Those numbers, I hate those numbers. I just despise, like, they're just impossible. And they even said on the broadcast when I was watching it back this morning, it's impossible to tell whether it's a 0 or an 8 on, or even a 9. Like, it's impossible to tell. But either way, edge rushers certainly I thought stood out.
Yeah, this defense deserves a lot of credit because we spent a lot of time talking, rightfully so, about how bad the defense was against Iowa, and certainly the run defense and giving up 329 yards, which had not happened against a Wisconsin defense since the 2012 Rose Bowl against Oregon. And they were going to be challenged in a different way, which is something guys talked about during the week, especially through the air. I know Oregon didn't have Tez Johnson, and you have to take that into consideration because that was the number one wide receiver, but injuries happen. Wisconsin doesn't have Tyler Van Dyke, okay? Will Pauling got hurt. Kyan Johnson ended up on the field. So a lot of stuff happens. Oregon still had plenty of weapons, even if guys were getting hurt. And they did, again, everything they could have done, Oregon could have scored 1 or 2 touchdowns early. And frankly, the game would have been over. As I was watching, I was thinking, all the Ducks have to do is get a tiny bit of separation. And to me, this game is over because you and I both know where this offense stands, especially against quality competition. But the defense kept them out of the end zone with 2 field goals and, again, had that early turnover and just consistently made life difficult. So Mike Tressel dialed up some really good things, and they did all they could. And that, I think, is what makes it even more frustrating, especially when you talk to some of those defensive guys. Look, nobody wants to throw anyone under the bus, and Jake Chaney, who gave a very, I think, impassioned post-game talk with us, said as much. You don't want to point the finger, but there's a lot of frustration going on when you put that effort forward, and on the other side, you just can't get it done.
So if anybody wants to see the full Jake Chaney video, you can go up on the camp's YouTube page. I posted it last night. It is definitely worthwhile. It's definitely worth your time to go and listen to it and watch it, because he definitely is speaking from a place of hurt, and he's speaking from a place of feeling the same way after a lot of games, and feeling like they have done enough at times to win these games. But it's been 4 years, man. He's been here for 4 years. And we can talk about them beating number 9 Iowa back in 21 or number 25 Purdue and all that good stuff, and beating Minnesota last year. But I think he said the very big picture thing out loud, and that is they do not have a quality win in his time. They do not have a big time win in his career when he's been at Wisconsin. He's been here since 2021. They don't have that. They do not have a win that you can just sit there and say, that's the win. That's the win we're going to be talking about when they come back for a reunion, right? What is it? Like, what's the game you talk about? Like, everyone has those games that they get to come back and talk about. Like, Melvin Gordon was there on Saturday night. He's got a number of games to talk about. The 2012 Big Ten championship game, his game against Nebraska, the Auburn game. Like, you can go on down the list. He's got so many games that he can sit there and they can reminisce about all these big wins that they had. Jake Chaney does not have that. So when he's talking like he did last night, it rings true, and it rings very loudly for me when I hear him and saying, we can talk about the standard. The standard's not set. Well, the standard actually started to become what they have been the last 4 years. And really, I mean, if we'd throw 2020 in here if you want to, that's probably not fair just because of everything that was going on. But that's become more the standard than anything else.
It has. I know we could save that whole segment for what went wrong.
We can. But... Yeah, no, we can. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump into that. That's my bad.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, look, that was one of my biggest takeaways, and certainly number one based off the player interviews. It's a guy who, and much like many other guys, puts everything he has into this. I thought it was interesting. He was just talking about what a college student would think. Like, I got to go home and do homework. Probably not going to get good grades. I don't know why you would have something that would have to be turned in Saturday night. I sure hope that wasn't the case, or even Sunday. But like, you got a lot of other things on your mind. And one of them is trying to bring some pride back to this program. He is a team leader, and he even talked about just taking responsibility for what he said were his failures and the team failures. And when he was asked to elaborate, he was speaking more about the lack of results. I certainly am not going to put it on one guy, and I wouldn't put it on him at all. But yeah, we hope for honesty when we talk to these guys. And a lot of times they're extremely guarded. And I frankly probably would be too, because the last thing you want to do is create a story that we're talking about that is inside the locker room. But he said, I'm not going to lie to you guys. You see basically you see what the product is. And I'm paraphrasing, but we see it too as players. The coaches see it too. And it just hasn't been good enough.
Yeah. So obviously that was a big part of what went right. The defense, obviously. And I think we can talk more about this a little bit later, because there were some questions for sure about it as well. But, in terms of what else went right for Wisconsin, I thought Tyree Walker had his best game, and I thought Darian Dupree ran hard. The yardage wasn't necessarily there to begin with, and it was non-existent in the final 4 drives. But those 4 drives in between, 3 of the 4 drives in between, moved the ball, and you got the Braden Locke deep ball right where it needed to be to Vinny Anthony. There were some moments offensively where they certainly stood out.
So many penalties that could have, if not been called, changed the game. And even Tawee Walker's longest run ended up being a 22-yarder, but it was a touchdown run until it was called back by a holding on Bryson Green. And I mean, obviously that impacted the play, so I can't pretend like.
I don't know if you saw this or not. When I was watching it back this morning, they gave him a lot of yardage that he probably shouldn't have gotten.
Oh, okay.
So apparently, like, where the hold started and where they actually called it, it shouldn't have been. Like, that was a 3rd down play, I thought. Either way, it shouldn't have been a 1st down. Like, he got 13 extra yards that he probably should not have gotten.
Okay. Well,
either way, it worked.
They did. They ran hard. They showed some good things. And I mean, even the series where, okay, they go to the Wildcat and Tawee runs it around the right side. There were at least some things that you saw. They were trying to open it up or do something differently. There just obviously wasn't enough. But yeah, I mean, Tawee ends up with 97 yards in a game like that against a very solid defense. And Dupree, we know about his speed. Thought he had some power. I think of maybe it was the second run that he had. Just ran it right up the middle and was plowing forward past the 1st down marker. Like, I think people think about Darian as more of a speedy guy, but he has some power too. So he's a glimpse of the future, certainly. It's just that there wasn't enough. And it's hard. Again, I think I say this every time they lose, hard not to talk about what went wrong when we're talking about what went right, because there are these little slivers. And yet I can't ignore the fact they opened the game with 3 straight 3-and-outs, minus 3 yards. And as you mentioned, the final 4 drives. So just not good enough.
It wasn't. Was there anything else that kind of stood out for you?
I mean, not
like in terms of what went right. I mean, Nathaniel Vakos hit both of his kicks.
And obviously that was critical. I want to say, just big picture, the environment.
It was legit.
Honestly, dude, jump around was as crazy as I can remember it. And I obviously, my memory fails me quite frequently. It was nuts. I think it's everything. And this was yet another huge recruiting weekend for the program, where you're bringing in plenty of guys, including a certain 4-star quarterback who's still on the board. And what do you want to show them? You want to show them why they want to be a part of it. And that place was shaking so much. And certainly because of the situation, Wisconsin led 13-6, and Oregon's about to have a 4th down that they end up converting. So
was it really was. I must have just, I must have messed that up. I think I said 4th and 9.
It was 4th and 9.
Oh, okay. I think you just said 4th and 6.
Oh, if I said that, I didn't mean to. It was 4th and 9 at the 41, and it was just a great atmosphere. It's everything you want to do when you want to showcase your program, other than actually winning the game.
That sucks, right? That's
not ideal.
I mean, that sucks just to even say. There's been way too many moments like that of late. You go back and they're 5-18 against ranked teams since 2018.
Yeah.
They are 0-7 in their last 7. They haven't beaten a ranked team since 2021. It's been I did the days. It was 11.
1,144 days, I believe.
Yes. Did you do that? Did you do that too? No,
I
or you
did.
just okay? All right. Well, we're on. Hey, we're
Oc
we're right. We're on the same page here. We're on the
October
exact.
30th, 2021 against number 9 Iowa, and,
Yep.
but that's yeah, I think of that idea of what the standard is, and that unfortunately for Wisconsin is what the standard has been. They don't win these big moments, and I don't wanna take away from the fact that, like, there is no shame in losing by 3 points to the top-ranked team in the country. It's just that when you are where Wisconsin is, you desperately need something special to happen to show you can be more than what you are.
Are they a team that's 3 points away from beating the number 1 team?
Well,
I mean, they played that way last night, certainly, right?
yeah.
Or I mean, we'll throw Oregon's injuries out the window. We'll throw Wisconsin's injuries out the window. But that's a $20 million+ roster that they got over there. Wisconsin doesn't, but last night they were able to muck it up enough, especially defensively, and the way that they kind of made Dylan Gabriel, if we're being fair, look not like a 6-year quarterback. I didn't think he was as locked in as he has been this year. That may have been one of his more poor performances. I know it was. I mean, his pass rating is the lowest of the season. And Wisconsin's defense against Oregon's, run game, after giving up 329 yards and 6.1 yards per carry, held it to 3.4 yards per carry. So there was a lot there, but do you think they're only 3 points away?
It's a tough question to answer because in part, so yes, Oregon's roster financially is on a level that Wisconsin's is not. But I think about over those years, you'd see Wisconsin match up against Ohio State, and you'd say, well, Ohio State has more talent. Look at all the 4- and 5-star guys. Wisconsin doesn't have that. And yet they have shown at times that they can win those games. So on a given night, yeah, I think when Wisconsin reaches its ceiling, it can be that close. The problem is how infrequently they've been that close. And I think it goes back to one of the things Jake Chaney says, that he's like, that's what made this one hurt the most. And that's why I think multiple guys framed it in the way that they did, because of how close they truly were. All this time they want to preach, we're close, we're close. And that goes back to essentially what Jake said. He said you could say the Penn State game was close. And it was. They were down 1 point in the fourth quarter. They ended up losing by 15. But he said when you're in a game and it literally goes down to the final possession, that's different. Think about all the other losses. Yeah, you were close with USC. You had a lead at halftime. You played one good half. You got blown out in the second half. You got blown out by Alabama and by Iowa. You were close against LSU in the bowl game, but it wasn't good enough. And obviously the Ohio State game, you were close in that one and ended up losing by 2 touchdowns. But to be in a spot where you literally have one possession to win the game, and for Wisconsin, it was multiple opportunities to go win the game, that's different. So, consistently, are they 3 points away from beating the number 1 team? No, but on a given night, they can be there. The problem is they just are not at a level where you're going to expect that a lot of times. And again, I don't know how fair it was even when Wisconsin was in its heyday to expect them to maybe consistently be in the game, but they've just slipped so far that you're at a point where you're hoping they're close, where you hope they beat the teams they used to beat. And I've said before, that's the place where they have to get back to as a baseline and then start winning some of these games, because Luke Fickell wasn't hired at $7.8 million a year to be 0-6 against ranked teams. And I totally understand that the issues with this program predate him coming here, but he's had almost 2 full seasons now, and they just have not been able to take advantage of a single meaningful moment, really.
And I also think it's getting probably tiresome for fans to listen to him talk about these losses, because it's a very, very similar script that how this stuff plays out. And he actually even said it at halftime in talking to NBC that we've been here before and we haven't done it, so we have to go out and do it. And they didn't do it. And look, if I'm being completely fair, I wasn't overly impressed with Oregon.
No.
Like, when Alabama's offensive line came in here in September, they bullied Wisconsin, like putting guys like on their backs and laying on them. I didn't see that a ton last night. I know they were a different type of program, and they were missing some very, very good players on the outside for sure. But there wasn't like their defense was fine. It's a good defense. I'm not going to give them credit for Braden Locke missing throws, though. I'm not. That's not going to happen. Again, we'll get to that. But like, just Fickell saying that's crushing when he came in. You know, to be able to not be able to find a way again to come out on top is difficult because they haven't found a way to finish. Yeah, I would agree. That's difficult, and it's also tiresome, and it's also very, very upsetting for fans who have to continue to hear that and listen to it and not see a problem fixed. But this was what went right. I
Well, let
guess
me ask
now
you let me ask you one what went right question. Is there any possible way to view this game as the first real sign of progress because of the spot that they were in a matchup where they're two touchdown underdogs? We know what Oregon has done to other teams this season, and again, they're probably just they're walking through this game because they're worn out, but whatever. That's still the number one team in the country. Is there any way, if we're going to frame this in a what went right category, that someone could look at that and say, I see some progress that gives me hope for the future?
I think in places not focused, and look, Luke Fickell didn't want to do it after the game, which is I completely understand. You tried it. You tried to get him to talk about the quarterback spot. He just wasn't going to do it. You know, he's going to say there's a whole lot more to it than just obviously Braden Locke. But I don't. I mean, if we take the quarterback out of it, yeah, I definitely think there's spots of progress and in spots of things where it is starting to look a little bit better. If they had any kind of threat at quarterback, I think the running game would be significantly better. If they had any, like if it, I mean, he can make some throws, but he hasn't done it against quality competition on a consistent basis. He just hasn't. You have the great throw to Vinny Anthony, and then you have the two missed throws to, or the earlier missed throws to Tyree Walker and to Will Pawn. I mean, Tyree Walker was wide open. Put the ball on him. Put the ball on him. So I think that there are things around the quarterback that have, you could say there were steps in the right direction. Defensively, certainly Christian Allegro and what he's brought. And the problem with the defensive side of the ball is so many of these guys are not going to be here next year. So like when you make strides defensively, and the guys that are making the strides are Nazir Forkery and Elijah Hills and, you know, John Pius and, you know, Hunter Wohler and Preston Zach. Like, I guess Preston could come back, but there are like the guys that are stepping up. It's tough because so many of them are going to be gone. Now there's some young players that you like. I loved what Xavier Lucas did on that blitz. Like it was as impressive as the play he's made. And that includes the interception. It was a great call by Mike Tressel, by the way. But like, I love that. So yeah, I mean, if I could sit here and say a lot of that stuff is intriguing and signs of progress and signs of potentially what's there, but it could also, all those guys could be gone next year. So what, you know, this is just, it's a really, really difficult thing to say. And if they had won, we probably would be glossing over some of this stuff that went wrong, right? But they didn't. And this what went right segment went way longer than I thought it would, even though we included a whole bunch of stuff that didn't go right. So all I'm saying, I guess I didn't really truly answer your question. I think that there are some things that you can look and say, this is signs of progress. I do. But will it mean anything if they go and get blown out next week?
No.
Because it felt like there were signs of progress against Penn State until obviously the pick six. And the next week they didn't even show up. And I have no idea how you bounce back. I mean, they did not bounce back well from the Penn State game. I have no idea how you bounce back from what happened last night and put together a complete performance or even like make it a game. It's just, I don't know if they have it in them. Now that was the talk after the game last night. Luke Fickell was very clear that they have to bounce back quicker. But when Jake Cheney's sitting there, I haven't won a big game. I never won a big game in my 4 years here. How is he viewing Nebraska? How is he viewing Minnesota? It would suggest that he's not viewing them as big games. And so I'm wondering if the rest of the team feels that same way. Is that unfair? I don't know. Perhaps it's unfair.
I don't think it's totally unfair. It's one thing to get up for a top 5 game against a team that you don't have an opportunity to play maybe once in your career just because of the nature of where the Big Ten is at, or certainly the Alabama game. If you're a senior, you don't not going to play them next year. Nebraska and Minnesota are not those games. Now, Minnesota certainly has a tremendous history, and that game is important in winning the Axe. When that Axe week arrives, they're going to have everyone's full attention. But he's also saying it in the heat of the moment, coming off a really disheartening loss against the number one team in the country. And he's referring to the ranked games, the ones that separate you as a program. We saw what they did a year ago. They were 5-5 in the same spot, beat Nebraska in overtime, beat Minnesota, and that's great. Makes you feel better about what that season was, which was still a disappointment. But it's not a program defining win like this could have been.
Yeah, no. As I said, I go back to it. They don't have a single win that the senior class that came here in 21 is going to be talking about. It's going to be about all the times you came up short, which sucks. And I feel for those guys. So let's jump into what went wrong, because we haven't really even truly touched on what went wrong last night. Their first 3 possessions, how many yards did they have?
-3.
On their last 4 possessions, how many yards did they have?
I know they didn't get a first down.
In between that, they had 4 drives where they put up all their yards. But I believe 7 drives, 21 plays, -8 yards. The first 3 drives and the final 4. What? Come on. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. And they look, Phil Longo was trying to put them in some better situations, on second and third down, just running. I mean, it ran it quite a bit on first down, especially early in that game. They found some things that worked for sure in that 4 drive stretch where they scored all 13 of their points. But as soon as Oregon scored to make it 13-13, did it feel like the game was over? Like, it was just, you just kind of expected it. Even though the defense made stops, you're just like, I know the offense isn't gonna find a way, because they got out of whack. But it all comes back to the guy behind center, in my opinion.
I felt the same way when they tied the score. But yeah, I mean, this comes down to offensively, and we have to start with quarterback play. Braden Locke completed 12 of 28 passes. Is that right? 12 for 28 for 96 yards. Threw the touchdown pass, went under center, threw the 2-yard touchdown pass to Will Pauling. We should have mentioned that and what went right, but that segment again went long enough. And I know you mentioned this. It's the fewest passing yards by a Wisconsin quarterback in a loss since Jack Cohn in 2018. Jack was making his 2nd career start. Braden made his 10th career start. He's been doing it over 2+ seasons. Yes, coming from a backup role, but this is his 7th start this season. I know Oregon has a talented defense, but it just was nowhere near good enough, not consistent enough. We've seen this pretty frequently, and it had to be better. Now, when I did ask Luke about it, and I said, I understand Oregon as a very talented defense, but what do you need to do to get better quarterback play or more consistent quarterback play? And he used that as an opportunity to talk about that we can't put it all on the quarterback's shoulders. It's easy to just look at the quarterback. And that is fair. You look at all these drives, the first 3, they were in 3rd and 10, 3rd and 14, 3rd and 10. I went back and looked. They were 1 for 12 on 3rd down. Their average yards to go on 3rd down against Oregon was 8.9 yards. And on the 3rd down throws the 3rd down plays where Braden threw the ball, or at least had an intent to throw the ball, he went 1 for 7 for 5 yards and was sacked twice. So you're putting your quarterback in a situation where that's not where you want to be. And that takes everybody. On the other hand, look at and it's not fair, because on the other side, you have a Heisman Trophy quarterback, but that's the difference that a quarterback can make. And I'm not saying Wisconsin needs a Heisman Trophy quarterback, but you're in a 4th and 9, the game's on the line, and he manages to throw a dart for 15 yards to keep the play alive, and they score a touchdown. Wisconsin just doesn't have anything that's good enough, and they don't have anybody else that they can put in there. No matter how much you want to ask me or anybody or put on social media, put maybe Matire, and Phil Longo answered that question last week. He's not going to play ahead of Braden Locke, because if he were ready, he would be out there. So this is who they're rolling with, and it's just highly problematic against quality competition.
Yeah, so this is what I wrote in my little thing that I do for our website. He's thrown at least 1 pick in every start this year. something Wisconsin's offense hasn't been nearly good enough to overcome against quality competition. Yet the Badgers have to keep running Locke out there because his backup, freshman Mabry Matoyer, isn't an upgrade at this point, according to the coaches. If that isn't depressing for fans to think about, nothing is. Because I think I may have tweeted this, might have thrown up in Blue Sky. Can't remember. It's tough, man. It's tough having two different ones. I really want to be on Blue Sky and do all that stuff, but it's just it's tough. I don't want to be putting the same stuff up on both. That doesn't necessarily make sense. But either way, it feels like, and I said roll, but I should have said push. Trying to push a boulder up a mountain with him at quarterback. That's what it feels like to me. And 43 of his 96 yards came on one play. It's not good enough. Wisconsin knew it wasn't good enough. That's why they went out and got Tyler Van Dyke. They talked about how I got into a back and forth with somebody on Twitter last night, or actually probably very early this morning, about the coaches saying it was a close competition. And if Van Dyke had been here, it wouldn't have been any different. And I'm like, they said that, but it wasn't. And it's not that they were lying about it. They were trying to keep Braden Locke engaged in case they needed him, which they obviously did. Saying 1A and 1B, that's a very feel-good thing for a backup quarterback. But we all know, we saw it. We saw every single fall practice before that was almost every fall practice before that was decided. It wasn't close. Tyler Van Dyke was the better quarterback. Did it show up in those first two games? No. But those first two games in a new offense, I feel like if we got to see Tyler Van Dyke for an extended period of time, he would significantly be better than what we've seen from Braden Locke against quality competition. Braden tore it up against the shit opponents that they faced in Rutgers and in Purdue. I mean, Purdue may be the worst team that's ever played in the Big Ten. They are horrendous. They are horrible. Horrible. And Braden Locke tore him up. Congratulations. It doesn't matter. He doesn't do it against quality competition. And he said after the game last night, he thought that it was pretty clean. What? You had a delay of game coming out of a kickoff. You put the ball on the ground on the first possession. You fumbled. On the second possession, you tried to throw an interception. You missed multiple wide open receivers for big gains / touchdowns. You had to call timeouts because you couldn't get and maybe this is some of Phil Longo, but you're also the quarterback, and you tried to change a play late and ended up having to call a timeout. I don't think again, he is a shit ton smarter about football than I will ever be. But in looking at it and watching it, it doesn't feel like he's grasping everything that he needs to grasp, and he doesn't have the physical talent to overcome that. In play. Before the play, he made some great checks. I thought there was one great check where check to a running play that ended up like a 10-yard gain. It was a great call based on what the defense says. He does a great job. I think he's going to be a fantastic offensive coordinator or a coach someday. It's just not going to be playing quarterback at a high level. Is that too harsh? Probably.
No,
I was told to be meaner on the podcast, which is the first time that's ever happened.
It's tough, right? Because the criticism has to come from a place of understanding that these guys are still in college. On the other hand, this is now professional sports to some degree, but you want to have a level of respect. And I think you're also just saying it like it is. The body of work overall has not been good enough. He's thrown 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions this season. Every game, I feel like we're talking about, oh, look, his completion percentage is right around 50%, other than obviously the couple games where the offense flourished against bad competition, but that is not the path forward to winning games.
Shit competition, I think, is what the word you're looking for. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and Wisconsin's just in a really tough spot because they didn't go and get Tyler Van Dyke for this season to look like this. And Phil Longo is doing the best that he can to try and run an offense where he's got essentially one hand behind his back. But he's also to blame for saying, I'm going to go and get this guy and put a lot of this on my guy. And it just has not improved. You can't win in this league the way that it's structured, especially with how Wisconsin wants to run this offense now, with quarterback play like this. You could probably get away with this if you were the Wisconsin of old, but you don't have that level of talent or at least consistency along the offensive line and at running back, and you're not running that system. You need your quarterback to throw the ball and make some plays. And while we've seen some glimpses, and I give him that, there are certain shots that he takes and you go, holy crap, that is perfect. And the Vinny Anthony throw is a great example of that ended up leading to a great drive and points. But it doesn't happen enough. And it's not just that. It's what you're talking about, Zach. It's missing open receivers at critical junctures. How many times have we talked about that? You can't miss when you only get 1 or 2 chances like that in an entire game. And we've seen too often that he is missing.
So they are now averaging 23.9 points per game, which is just, hey, I mean, it's improvement, right?
It is better than 23.5.
I was going to say, how big of improvement is it?
0.4, when a year ago it was the lowest point total on average in 19 years. And here's another thing about what happened against Oregon. I went back and looked. They averaged 3.6 yards per play, which is the worst of any game in the Phil Longo era.
Which has been a fantastic era of offensive football.
I'm just saying. It was
I'm saying like that.
Whatever we saw before.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like as bad as it is. Did you know that Wisconsin, since 2015, I went back and looked through, went through all the games. I didn't sleep much last night. They are now 56-8 when allowing 16 points or less since 2015.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. That's a pretty good number. Other than last night.
That's what I'm saying. They have won games like that how many times? 56-8 when they score 16 points, or excuse me, when they allow 16 or fewer. And like some of the games that they lost are like Iowa in 2015. Like, yeah, not great. But like they won a stretch where they went 9-0, 3-0, 6-0 in that stretch where they were really good for Paul Chryst in 20. I think it was would have been 2017.
15, 16, 17, something like that, when they won 10 into the Holiday Bowl.
Yeah, but like the first year was 15. They went 6-2 that year, and the next year was 16. They went 7-1. The lone loss being the game at Michigan, where there was no offense being played whatsoever. But then they went 9-0, 3-0, 6-0 the next 3 years, and they just haven't been good enough. They just haven't been good enough offensively. The defense did exactly what it needed to do, and the offense did get it done. So, Braden Locke, it is what it is, and people are yelling. Nothing can be worse. Nothing can be worse. And I'm fully on board with giving Mabry a chance, but I'm not the one that you need to convince. And I said that last night. It's like he's not it. I know he's not it. You don't have to convince me. Like you can, I totally agree with you. The coaching staff doesn't. The coaching staff feels like he still gives them their best chance. That feels like an indictment on the coaching staff, but that is where they're at right now because of the quarterback position. They're playing with their backup quarterback right now, and their backup is a true freshman who wasn't like a highly, highly, highly touted true freshman. He's a guy that was not ready to play when we saw him last, and maybe he's not either. And again, that has to be depressing. So, again, this was a question. Maybe we get into. Was there anything else? What went wrong that you wanted to hit on?
I mean, we covered it. And the short version, the TLDR is defense good, offense bad. So that's where we're at.
Quarterback not great. So all right, let's jump into some listener questions here, and I'm not even reading this one. It's just I got one. It's one that I saw 8 million times last night. Is there a single quarterback that has played at Wisconsin since 2000 that loses that game last night, other than Braden Locke? And when you go back and think about it, there are a few that I can come up with that probably may have done as poorly. I think Allen Everidge probably does as poorly. He was not good. I would say, though, I feel like Braden Locke actually has a better left-handed throw than the lefty Allen Everidge. I know that's mean, but it feels like, we would have been talking about that play forever. It would have been like the David Gilreath kick return. If he had thrown a left-handed touchdown for in a game that they beat the number one team, would have been talking about it forever. Unfortunately, Joe Huber and it looked like a few other guys were downfield already, but that was a hell of a play by him, and one we would have been talking about forever. He would have been etched in Wisconsin lore, which would have been unfortunate, but the play, ridiculous. I'm trying to think who else. Justin Shear, Kurt Phillips. But like at least Kurt Phillips, before all his knee injuries, could run.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I don't know, man. There's
Danny O'Brien.
There's not a lot. I mean, Tanner McAvoy was not a great thrower of the ball, but he was so athletic that he probably could have done some damage. And he still does have these 17 straight completions against Western Illinois, and no one will ever be able to take that away from him. So, I mean, look, it was just bad. 96 yards passing. I know Oregon's defense. I went and looked. It's like, what is the average completion percentage of the quarterbacks that they've played? And I think it's only like 53%. It's just that couldn't even get to 50%.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, obviously, because that's kind of his thing. At least it was earlier in the year. There's just a lot of mean questions. Like,
can we pick just a few questions because they're probably all the exact same topics?
Yeah. How much is a bus ticket for the Locke family back to Texas? Like, that's just not nice. I mean, I didn't need to read that. I shouldn't have read that, but that's my bad. Overreaction or no? Luke Fickell, based on the team's performance this season against good teams, can take this program to the next level once they find the right quarterback.
Oof, God, that's such a hard question.
I should have saved that for Tuesday.
Yeah, that's good. You busted out the overreaction or no on a Sunday show, so I know it's serious.
I'm a little, again, I told you I didn't sleep much last night, so I'm a little out of it.
It's such a tough question to answer, in part because you have to ask, well, who is the offensive coordinator and what exactly does this team and program look like? I'm not going to say yes yet. I think it's an overreaction just because it's easy to say plug in a quarterback and this team is on an entirely different level, and they'd certainly be at a higher level. But I mean, what is it, turning the program around? Like, what exactly? I mean, what does that mean? Are they on the cusp of being a college football playoff team? Because I think that's where that's the hope in all of this is, okay, if you're going to hire Luke and you're going to ask the athletic director, say you have championship level expectations, I think that's where it has to start. And I'm not ready to even say that if they've got that one player that it would change everything. Just depends who the player is, though. If you have $5 million and you want to go get Cam Ward, then fine. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I don't think that's realistic. So, like, I guess I'm also trying to be pragmatic about what does that actually mean? Like, yeah, go pluck the number one portal guy and throw all the money in the world at him ahead of every other college program, and this guy's a number one NFL draft pick. Okay, but like, it's just not realistic to me.
I completely agree that it's not realistic, but that wasn't the question. It was
okay. Then
right?
Yes, they are $10 million quarterback away from being where they need to be.
The question was about finding a good quarterback. It wasn't, the right quarterback. It wasn't about the $5 million quarterback. Again, we're splitting hairs here. What I'm saying is, if they had a Dylan Gabriel this year, they still lose to Alabama. They probably still lose to Iowa. But I think they beat USC. I think they beat Penn State, and I think they win that game last night. That's the thing. Quarterback is just absolutely vital. Look at Colorado. Colorado was nothing for how long? And then Shedeur Sanders shows up, and they have 8 wins. There are other things that go into play, no doubt, about winning college football games. But quarterback, more so than any other position, whether it's the NFL or the college game, can change the fortunes of a team. Imagine your first year if Russell Wilson's not there, and instead it's, who was it, Joey Brennan, or who's the guy, who's the backup?
He ended up being the backup, yes.
Imagine that. All the talent you have everywhere else does not matter. You need the quarterback. You need the quarterback to be able to make plays for you to win games, and they don't have that. And they, you know, haven't had that for quite some time. I mean, Jack Cohn's probably the last one that made plays to win games for them. You know what? I shouldn't say. I think Tanner Mordecai, if not hurt, would have given them something. But a guy that actually did give them something, I would say Jack Cohn. So
it's
all
a
the
good
talent.
question.
It is. I should have saved it for Tuesday. That's my bad. Is it possible to reach a conclusion on Phil Longo with Locke at quarterback? That's the question from Brennan. He says, or would you say the failure to adapt the offense to the personnel is an indictment in itself?
That's such a great question, and I think when we see whatever Luke Fickell decides to do after this season, is the answer to that question. Because if he decides I need Phil or want Phil for that third year, then I think that will tell you that he believes that the quarterback situation wasn't good enough and it wasn't a fair assessment of what he can do with an offense with his full talent. But they do go hand in hand. You know, it's not like Braden was someone from the previous staff and they just couldn't get somebody else in there. It was somebody that he wanted. It was somebody that in the preseason talked about that if he were our starter, we would feel good about that. But he is limited. I mean, obviously Braden is limited with what he can do and Phil is limited with what he can call. So, you make $1.25 million a year to figure out the answer. And so the blame certainly goes all the way around. But I think that's the biggest, out of all the questions that Luke has to answer this offseason, to me, that's the biggest is offensive coordinator. What do we want this to be? The identity as the offense. And do I have belief in Phil that if we have the right people in place, we can get to a point that is not what this is?
Connor kind of was thinking the same thing with you. Is it a loser mentality to thinking to be encouraged, or I should say, is it loser thinking to be encouraged by that effort?
I think I'm not a fan. We come at this from a reporter's perspective, and I feel like because of when I arrived in 2011, where things were humming along at a level that were, they were the envy of a lot of programs. Maybe I'm jaded. But I look at it and say, that's not progress to me, not enough progress. And I totally get it's the number one team in the country, but this is still Wisconsin. This is still supposed to be a place where you can win some of those big games. Not every big game, but I don't feel good about having what that result was, for lack of a better way to put it, even if that's not entirely fair. Because if you roll Wisconsin out against the number one team every year for the next 20 years or for the last 30 years, they'd probably have a losing record. On the other hand, they wouldn't be winless.
No, they wouldn't. And they also haven't had a ton of opportunities, right? I mean,
yeah, it's been 14 years.
The last one was 14 years. And before that, it was had been 13 years. And before that, it had been 16 years, right? So they don't get many opportunities. I think they've only played 4 number one teams, now 5 number one teams since 1981. Or I might be off on that. Maybe I'm thinking of it's irrelevant. They don't get too many opportunities at what happened last night. They had so many opportunities for those big wins that Jake Chaney wanted this year at home. Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State had so many opportunities for those big wins. And he's talking about, he said the right things about how, next year I believe in this group and I believe in the coaching staff, and next year those wins are going to start coming. He was saying the right things. I wonder if he actually truly believes that. One from Blue Sky here. Ryle, is the Badgers defense more suited to stopping this type of offense versus a traditional Big Ten offense?
Well, we see what happens when they play someone that's going to ram it down your throat. They've had some issues. On the other hand, they also had issues with offenses like this, where you've got an athletic quarterback who can get out in space and they've got wide receivers. I almost feel like it's a toss-up. But they had a great game plan for Oregon. They really did. I mean, for as much as we want to spend time talking about Phil Longo, and that's understandable, Mike Tressel deserves a lot of credit because he's also faced plenty of heat and didn't know what direction this defense was going to go after what happened against Iowa, and they were just outstanding.
Yep, for sure. One last one here. Percent chance you give the following quarterbacks to be the Badgers starter next year: Locke, Mabry, Tyler Van Dyke, player TBD.
Ooh, this is such a good question, hypothetical. I will give the highest percentage to Tyler Van Dyke.
Okay.
Look, he's got a year left. He's rehabbing. If he's healthy, I don't see him going anywhere. Where's the upside of going anywhere else? His goal has been the NFL. You're certainly not going to take that path now. You're not going to go, at least in my mind, to another school for your 6th year. You were good enough to be the starter here. You don't have to start over. If those other quarterbacks that are still on the roster are on the roster a year ago, they're not going to be ahead of Tyler Van Dyke. The real question is the injury situation coming off an ACL. Where are you at 12 months later or 11 months later? The TBD is the big one. Who is out there in the portal? Well, we don't know yet. The Carter Smith situation is intriguing, though. Again, true freshmen, they don't play right away. At least not here, not for a long, long time. So right now, I'll go Tyler Van Dyke #1. But that portal thing is real intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, because of the expected changes, and Luke Fickell definitely needs to be asked, like, does he still have confidence in his offensive coordinator? And that question, I feel like, is one that has to be asked, and probably asked this week. And by me saying that, I'm going to ask it because I think how do you have 36 points the last 3 weeks and be like, yeah, I still believe that this is the right direction. This is the way that everything should be heading. Now, I don't expect I don't expect at all to actually get an answer out of that. But you know what I'm saying. I would say player TBD for sure is probably where I'm thinking. So
TBD over TVD.
Yes, exactly. All right, we'll be back on Tuesday. Look ahead to Wisconsin's trip to Lincoln to face a Nebraska team that also is still looking for that 6th win to become bowl eligible for the first time since 2016. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.